Next, we are going to move on to our panel discussion. So for our panel discussion, we actually have 4 members from the Southeastern Partnership. Mark Woods, who is the state pavement engineer for Tennessee DOT. He has worked there for 15 years. Tracy Nowinski, who is the director of maintenance for the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Previously, she was the branch manager of operations and pavement management. Vince works for the pavement group at the West Virginia Division of Highways, and Sam Wheeler was supposed to be on today, but unfortunately he could not make it. So playing the role of Sam, who, just to let you all know, has worked for Georgia DOT for 30 years and is retiring in a month. Sam's part will be played today by Neil Galehouse. This first question is going to go to all of the panelists. The question is, when did you realize that your pavement preservation program was going to be a success? And let's start with Tracy.
As Sarah mentioned, my name is Tracy Novacek, and I'm from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Question is, when did we realize our preventive maintenance program is going to be successful? For Kentucky, our preventive maintenance program started out within the operations and pavement management group. We were the only ones selecting the treatments because there was that window of opportunity that Stan mentioned to get the right treatment and the right timing for the pavement. So a lot of the knowledge for the program was within the pavement management group. As time went on and the program grew, we founded the Preventive Maintenance Alliance, which was a group of statewide transportation engineers that worked together on the program. We made it a requirement for funding for these types of projects that you attend the meetings and get the training and have qualified individuals on site, etc. As our program grew and we put down more projects, there was a day that I was in one of the meetings and I realized that really our group, pavement management, no longer knew as much as the rest of the state. So our statewide engineers, and that's our statewide materials engineers and our section engineers and our inspectors, were really bringing more to the table than pavement management. We were there to guide the investments and to guide the budget and offer them resources, but they had attended the meetings, they had made the connections, they were working with each other, they were working with other statewide partners, and really the conversation had changed from what is this treatment and what does it look like to things like what types of emulsions we should be using, what the nozzle type should be, just very specific things. And so I would say that that's the moment that I knew that we were going to have a successful program, was when our statewide engineers knew more than the people who had started the program.
Mark?
For ours, I think it's probably piecemeal. I mean, we never have a perfect program, but we've had small successes, and so we've had. I think when we had an early small success, that's when we knew it was plausible to build a larger program. 10, 12 years ago, we had already been doing microsurface in one region of the state, which was more of a grassroots program, meaning the regional guys there they believed in micro and had been doing it since the 70s. And when we decided to stretch that out across the state, there was a lot of the normal resistance that you see with bringing preservation treatments to areas that aren't used to seeing them. All of the steps required of writing good specs, like Mr. Stan said, and getting the word out and educating people, and kind of leaning into that resistance. Once we started getting a couple of projects on the ground and they were actually a success after we were repeatedly told they wouldn't be, that's when we realized the door was open, that it was plausible to take a treatment you had not used before, develop specs, work through them, educate people, build plans, let them to contract, and get them on the road. That was really, really inspiring to us, because it taught us that for plenty of other treatments we could do that. Just because you're told something's not going to work by someone who's threatened by it doesn't mean that it's actually not going to work. I look forward to the day when we're in, when we do have a situation like Tracy's where we have guys at the regions and districts who know more about this stuff than we do, and we want that for all treatments out there.
Thank you, Mark. Next, Neil, you want to answer that question?
In the case of Georgia, they realized that the pavement preservation program was going to be successful when they went out and performed the data collection and the pavement condition evaluations, which revealed less deterioration during these reviews, and employees were able to see for themselves that the pavement life was actually being extended.
Vince, you ready?
So, yes, sorry about that. Some days I wonder if we have seen success yet in the grand scheme of things, because that bar is always rising. I suppose one of our biggest successes is moving our microsurfacing from a project-specific special provision to something that is in the spec book, and it is officially something that we do it. It's not just it might happen sort of thing. That was probably the 2017 was the first year that our microsurfacing was in the spec book. So that was a big win for us.
Moving right along. We're going to go with Vince again. If you could go back and change anything when you first started your program, what would it be?
When I first started, we did have a separate sort of pot of money for preservation. And shortly after I had started, that pot kind of got blended into the big pot. And there were some folks that saw that as a good thing, and they said, why have a separate pot of money? Preservation is what we do, so let's just acknowledge it as such. And I kind of wish I knew then what I know now, and I wish I would have thought that a little bit more, because I think certainly over the past few years we've all come to see the benefit of having that separate funding for preservation. Obviously, we've all talked about the benefits, but promising to the contractors that work is going to be there is a big one, because there's a lot to go along with that. The contractors investing their time and money into the equipment, workforce, and all that. That's one thing that's important to me.
Next, let's go with Mark. Who did you have to work the hardest to convince about preservation?
It's a pretty good mix. Some people just kind of get on board pretty quickly, and then others, some people you don't ever get them. I think the people you have to get on board are the people that matter, and the people that matter are the users of the roadway system. They're the people who are keeping anyone from doing preservation at the end of the line. When you do something that looks slightly different from the traditional mill and fill, if the phone never rang from people in the public who didn't like the way it looked or the sound of it or the texture, if the phone never rang from those people, then everyone else would just fall in line. The only reason, a natural answer is to say you have to convince your district and your operations people, but if the people in the public liked it and loved it and never called to complain, they would be on board. I think we've had some regional guys who are very, very pro preservation, who basically built grassroots marketing programs. So every project they were doing mailbox flyers to explain the project that's coming out, and that's an essential part of it. You can't just tell the users and the people that live in those areas, this is a TDOT road and TDOT's going to do whatever TDOT wants. You need to really, really include them in the process, tell them ahead of time, give them some explanations. Some people in public don't care that it's more cost effective. They just want the expensive thing. But I would say the most difficult is there are some Tennesseans particularly that can be a tad bit picky sometimes. I think they care about aesthetic more than they care about structural integrity and engineering performance. even when you tell them that it's 1/5 the cost and significantly more cost effective. So you're never going to convince those people. But if you can get the majority, you're doing fine.
Chip seals, I think, are one of those treatments that you turn my nice asphalt road back to gravel that we hear quite often. Let's go with Tracy next. Have you ever had a treatment fail?
Yes, we have. We had early on when Just Pavement Management was selecting the treatments, the projects, and sending them out, we had a microsurface job that a large rainfall came in and wiped out a good deal of our project. It created quite a mess. There was some car detailing that had to be done. There was a lot of public outcry about it, and it was difficult. We learned a lot of lessons from it, and the first lesson was really to just tackle it head on. Yeah, it was a problem, and we knew that we had to have better messaging to the public. We had to have better messaging to our leadership about what the goals of our program was, and we needed to instead of keeping all of that knowledge for the program within Just Pavement Management, we needed to have that outreach to our districts and work with them. We needed the rest of the state to want the program as much as we wanted the program, essentially. We did have some difficulty, but we never lost the program. We were able to move forward through it. Geographically, it took a while to get that region back on board, but we kept moving ahead with the partners that were willing to keep going with it. And we improved all of our specifications and improved our outreach to the districts and the inspector knowledge. And to this day, we have, if you're putting down a treatment that's new to you statewide, we will get you someone who knows that treatment, whether it's from the district or from central office. Someone can be there with you for that application if you're not familiar with it and you want some assistance. So it created difficulty, but we were able to overcome it, and it never stopped the program.
Yeah, that's always a big fear when starting a new treatment is if it fails, we won't do it again. In our state, our magic number is 20 years. Next question is for Neil. How was your preservation program began? Was it a fixed dollar amount? Was it based off of your PMS recommendations, annual line item, etc.?
For the Georgia DOT, their program began back in the 1970s through their pavement condition evaluation system known as PACES that allocated fixed dollar amounts based on system recommendations. More recently, the invitation to bid process allows their districts to plan their own preservation projects and treatment selection via state funds. Furthermore, non-interstate funding has been decentralized and divided out to the districts for project selection by district management leadership. There is not an annual line item in the budget for preservation.
Next question is for Mark, Tracy, and Vince. Who all is involved in creating and improving your specifications? We will start with Vince.
So we've got one guy who is our specifications engineer, and he's out of what we call our contract administration division. He's the main guy, but really our specifications, everybody is involved. Anybody who wants to be involved anyway. We have a committee which follows the Open Government Meeting Act. I like to tell people, within our districts that they are welcome to come. They are welcome to propose any specification changes. And I tell them they can bring anybody, they can even bring their grandmother. Anybody and everybody is involved. We do have 5 voting members from different divisions. And those are the ones that ultimately choose whether a specification change passes or fails. A lot of specification changes do come out of our materials division, which is where I'm based out of. I like the idea that it's so open. We get a lot of industry feedback and pushback, but a lot of feedback too. And it's good to have them involved, to kind of have a seat at the table, as you might say, to make our specs the best for everybody involved. And as part of that process, a spec has to go through committee at least 2 times before it can be made official. That gives people a chance to look at things thoroughly rather than, just kind of slipping something through the cracks. That's West Virginia.
That's great. A lot of our specifications started out as SPs and never ran through the committee, and so now we're trying to play catch up with them, I guess, to say the least. Tracy.
Our process is similar to West Virginia's. We have an annual meeting where the statewide engineers come together and talk about the projects that they put down in the previous year, what went right, what didn't go right. Any recommendations that come out of that meeting, any problems that come out of that meeting, go to a specifications subcommittee, which is made up of materials engineers and engineers from around the state. And they are a smaller group that discuss changes to the specs. And then that gets handed off. The recommendations go to our preservation engineer. And then we also have a materials engineer that works on maintenance related projects and has a maintenance focus. So they take those and they meet with industry, and then they put those changes in the specification.
And Mark?
So ours tend to generate when, the specifications are initiated by someone expressing a need, or a desire to have specs. So that generally will come from our resurfacing people who say, I saw this treatment somewhere, or I've heard of it and I want to try it. My office, the headquarters pavement office, will try to facilitate that. For TDOT, even in commodity work, specifications involve construction specs, material specs, design guidelines, which would include, how to calculate all the estimated quantities and stuff like that, and any potential plans, notes, and things that need to be put in there, or footnotes that would actually go into the construction plans. Like you mentioned, they're usually done by special provision, but you can't just have a special provision because that only modifies construction specs. You have to have that other stuff, the design guideline. So they usually be initiated at the operations level, and my office facilitate it. I would say for new treatments, I think 90% of it is material stuff. So we almost always just send it down to the materials office and ask them to please develop a specification. We have a road we want to do a project, say in February letting, so we need some finished specifications by November of the previous year, and then we just go around the horn. I think this is probably a good time to point out that we are just now looking into some of the AASHTO specs that are in the Committee on Material and Pavements. I kind of want to simultaneously, I want to advertise that they're there for a lot of treatments that are commodity preservation treatments at this point. They have AASHTO specifications for materials and for mixed design, and then the technical subcommittee 5V is developing construction guide specs. And if you're doing it correctly, if you're building something from scratch for a treatment you've never done, you really ought to look at those first, because they've been put together by a committee of people who have experience with them. Like I said, I do in Perry Locust, Tennessee. We're just now talking about looking in there and see how we can substitute those in. Referencing AASHTO specs would help you have a much thinner construction specifications book. So anybody who hasn't looked at that, I'm advertising you to look into some of the stuff that's out there.
Great, thank you, Mark. That is excellent advice. And I'm sorry to say, I think we are out of time for our panel discussion. I have several more questions I would like to get through, but we only have a limited time. So I think we're going to move on.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.